The blood had already soaked through 3 layers of quilts by the time Marshal Cole Thornton kicked open the door of the isolated homestead, his heart hammering harder than it ever had facing down outlaws on Dodge City's dusty streets. The woman on the bed was barely conscious, her face pale as the January snow piling up outside the small cabin's windows, and the elderly midwife kneeling beside her looked up at Cole with eyes that had seen too much death in her 60 years delivering babies across the Kansas plains. It was 1879, and the winter had come down hard and merciless on the settlements scattered between Dodge City and the Arkansas River, trapping people in their homes and making every birth a gamble with the devil himself. Cole had been riding the territory for 3 days, checking on homesteaders cut off by the blizzard, when he'd spotted smoke from this cabin's chimney growing thin and irregular. Something told him to investigate, that lawman's instinct that had kept him alive through range wars and gunfights. Now he stood in the doorway, snow melting off his heavy coat, staring at a scene that made his blood run cold for entirely different reasons than the weather outside. "She has been laboring for near on 20 hours, the midwife said, her voice cracking with exhaustion and something else, something that sounded like defeat. "The baby is breech turned wrong and she has lost too much blood already. I have done everything I know, Marshal, but I must tell you true, this baby will not survive the birth. The mother might not either if we do not act soon." The woman on the bed stirred, her eyes fluttering open. They were the color of summer grass, impossibly green even in her current state, and they found Cole's face with a desperation that hit him like a physical blow. He had never seen her before that moment, but something in those eyes reached into his chest and wrapped around his heart like a fist. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind howling outside. "Please save my baby. Promise me you will save my baby." Cole crossed the small room in 3 strides, dropping to his knees beside the bed. The midwife, a woman named Mrs. Hadley, whom he'd known for years, reached out to stop him, but he was already taking the young woman's hand in his own, feeling how cold her fingers were despite the fire blazing in the hearth. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice gentler than anyone in Dodge City would have believed possible from the hard man who kept order in the wildest town in the West. "Sarah," she managed, her teeth chattering. "Sarah Brennan. My husband, he went to Dodge City 4 days ago for supplies. He should have been back by now. He does not know about the baby coming early. He does not know any of this." Cole felt Mrs. Hadley's hand on his shoulder, pulling him back gently. The old woman's face was grave, lined with sorrow. "Marshal, might I have a word with you?" She did not wait for his answer, just moved toward the far corner of the single-room cabin, and Cole reluctantly released Sarah's hand to follow. "The baby is dying," Mrs. Hadley said bluntly, keeping her voice low so Sarah would not hear over her own labored breathing. "I can feel it with my hands the way I always can. The cord is compressed, has been for hours. Even if I could turn the baby now, which I cannot in her weakened state, it would be too late. And if I try to force the birth as it is, breech and tangled, Sarah will hemorrhage. She will die right here in front of us." Cole's jaw clenched hard enough to make his teeth ache. "There has to be something we can do. We could take her to Dodge City to the doctor there. In this storm? Marshal, you know as well as I do that she would never survive the journey. The nearest doctor is 15 miles away through snowdrifts higher than a horse's belly. No, our only choice is to try to save Sarah. I can end the baby's suffering quickly, and then we might be able to save the mother. It is the only merciful thing to do. No." The word came out harder than Cole intended, and several heads turned toward them. He looked back at Sarah and saw that her eyes were on him, as if she could hear every word despite the distance and the noise of the storm. "There has to be another way." "There is not, Mrs. Hadley insisted, and for the first time since Cole had known her, he heard anger in her voice. "Marshal Thornton, I have been delivering babies since before you were born. I have seen every kind of trouble that can happen in a birthing room, and I am telling you that this baby will not live." The kindest thing we can do is to ensure that the mother survives to perhaps have other children someday. Cole turned away from her, his mind racing. He was not a particularly religious man. You could not be, not after seeing what he'd seen in his 32 years of life, the last 8 of them spent keeping the peace in the wildest corner of the frontier. But his mother had been a believer, had taught him prayers before she died of fever when he was just 10 years old. And right now, with Sarah Brennan dying on that bed and her unborn child fading inside her, prayer was the only weapon he had left. He walked back to the bedside and knelt again, taking Sarah's hand. Her eyes found his, and he saw the terror there, the knowledge of what the midwife had said even if she had not heard the specific words. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I need you to listen to me. I need you to trust me." "Can you do that?" She nodded weakly, her fingers tightening around his with surprising strength. "Are you going to let them kill my baby?" The question was direct, cutting through all pretense, and Cole respected her for it even as it tore at his heart. "No," he said firmly. "I am not. I am going to stay right here beside you, and I am going to pray, and we are going to fight for this baby together. Do you understand me? You do not get to give up, and neither does this child." "Marshal," Mrs. Hadley protested, "you are giving her false hope. You are making this harder than it needs to be." Cole did not look away from Sarah's face. "Maybe I am," he said, "but I have seen men survive wounds that should have killed them. I have seen storms break when every sign said they would rage for days. I have seen impossible things happen, Mrs. Hadley, and if this woman wants to fight for her baby's life, then I am going to stand with her and do the same." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of despair. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for believing." Cole settled himself more comfortably on the floor beside the bed, still holding Sarah's hand, and closed his eyes. The words came haltingly at first. He had not prayed in years, not since he'd buried his mother, but they came. He prayed for Sarah's strength and for the baby's life. He prayed for wisdom for Mrs. Hadley and for Sarah's husband to return safely. He prayed for the storm to break and for dawn to come, because somehow it seemed important that they make it to dawn. Time became strange in that small cabin. The fire needed tending, and Cole rose periodically to feed it more wood, then returned to his place beside Sarah. Mrs. Hadley checked on her patient regularly, her face growing more troubled each time, but she said nothing more about ending the baby's life. Perhaps she recognized the futility of arguing with the stubborn Marshal, or perhaps she too was praying in her own way. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness as the night wore on. During her lucid moments, she talked to Cole in a voice that grew weaker with each passing hour. She told him about meeting her husband, Patrick, at a church social in Missouri 3 years ago. She told him about their decision to homestead in Kansas, about the dreams they'd had of building something lasting on the prairie. She told him about discovering she was pregnant in the fall, about Patrick's joy when she'd shared the news. "He will be a wonderful father," she said at one point when the wind had died down momentarily outside. "He is kind and patient. He never raises his voice in anger." When I told him about the baby, he cried. I had never seen him cry before. Cole listened to every word, committing them to memory as if they were sacred texts. He told her about his own life in turn, though there was less joy in his stories. He spoke of growing up in Texas, of learning to shoot and ride before he learned to read properly. He told her about becoming a lawman, about the satisfaction of bringing order to chaos, even if that order was sometimes enforced at gunpoint. "You have a family of your own?" Sarah asked him during one of her stronger moments, probably around midnight based on the way the fire was burning down. "No," Cole admitted. "I have never married. My work is dangerous, and it never seemed fair to ask a woman to wait at home wondering if I would come back each night. And I suppose I never met anyone who made me want to risk it anyway." Sarah smiled weakly at that. "You should marry, Marshal. A man should not be alone. It is not natural. Everyone deserves to love and be loved." Cole felt something twist in his chest at her words, but he just squeezed her hand gently. You focus on getting through this night, Sarah Brennan. Let me worry about my own future. Around 2 in the morning, Sarah's labor intensified again. Mrs. Hadley examined her and announced that the baby was trying to come, despite its terrible position. Sarah screamed with the pain, a sound that tore through Cole like a bullet, and he held her hand so tightly he was afraid he might break her fingers. But she never asked him to let go, never asked him to leave. She clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that was trying to tear her apart. "Push," Mrs. Hadley commanded. "Sarah, you must push now, whether you think you can or not. This baby is coming, and we must do everything we can to help it." Cole shifted position, moving to support Sarah's shoulders, holding her up as she bore down with everything she had left. Her screams echoed off the cabin walls, mixing with the howl of the wind outside. Blood soaked through fresh cloths as fast as Mrs. Hadley could lay them down, and Cole felt his own prayers becoming more desperate, more fervent. "Please," he whispered against Sarah's sweat-soaked hair. "Please, God, if you are listening, do not let her die, do not let this baby die. They deserve better than this, they deserve a chance." Sarah collapsed back against him, gasping for breath. "I cannot," she sobbed. "I cannot do this anymore, I am too tired, I have nothing left." "Yes, you do," Cole said fiercely, his mouth close to her ear. "Yes, you do, Sarah. You have your strength and your courage, and you have your love for this baby. You have me here beside you, and I am not leaving, I am not going anywhere, you hear me? We are going to do this together." She turned her head to look at him, and their faces were so close he could feel her breath on his skin. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care so much? You do not even know me." Cole opened his mouth to answer, but the words that came out surprised even him. "Because the moment I walked through that door and saw you, something in my life changed. I cannot explain it, Sarah. I do not understand it myself. But I know that I am supposed to be here right now, fighting beside you. I know that with everything I am." Sarah's eyes widened, and something passed between them in that moment, something that transcended the desperate circumstances and the blood and the pain. It was a recognition, a connection that went deeper than logic or reason. Then another contraction hit her, and the moment shattered into renewed agony. The next 2 hours were the longest of Cole's life. Sarah pushed until she had no voice left to scream, until her body was racked with tremors and her skin was cold and clammy with shock. Mrs. Hadley worked with grim determination, her skilled hands trying to guide the baby into a position where it might possibly survive the birth. And Cole prayed. He prayed with words and without them, with every breath and every beat of his heart. Somewhere around 4 in the morning, Mrs. Hadley let out a sharp exclamation. "The baby has turned," she said, and there was wonder in her voice. "I did not do it. I swear to you, Marshal, I did not turn this baby. But it has turned on its own, and it is in position now. Sarah, do you hear me? Your baby is ready to be born." Sarah was barely conscious, but she nodded weakly. Cole supported her weight entirely now, his arms wrapped around her from behind, his own strength the only thing keeping her upright. "One more time," he murmured to her. "Sarah, just one more time, you can do this, I know you can." She gathered herself for one final push, drawing on reserves of strength that should not have existed. Cole felt her body tense against him, felt every muscle strain toward this single purpose. And then, as the first faint gray light of dawn began to filter through the cabin's small window, a baby's cry split the air. Mrs. Hadley caught the infant, her hands moving with practiced efficiency even as tears streamed down her weathered face. "It is a boy," she announced, her voice choked with emotion. "A healthy baby boy, and he is breathing. Lord have mercy, he is breathing and crying, and I have never heard a sweeter sound in all my life." Sarah went limp in Cole's arms, unconscious but breathing. He eased her down onto the pillows as Mrs. Hadley cleaned the baby and wrapped him in warm blankets. The midwife placed the child on Sarah's chest, and Cole watched as the tiny boy instinctively nuzzled against his mother, seeking comfort and warmth. "I do not understand, Mrs." Hadley said, staring at the baby as if he were a miracle made flesh. He should not be alive. Every sign said he would not survive. The cord was compressed for hours. He should have suffocated. But look at him. Look at how pink he is, how strong his cry is. This is not natural, Marshal. This is not anything I can explain with midwifery. Cole reached out and touched the baby's tiny hand with one finger. The infant's fingers curled around his immediately, gripping with surprising strength. Maybe some things do not need to be explained, he said quietly. Maybe some things just need to be accepted as gifts. Sarah stirred, her eyes opening slowly. My baby, she whispered. Is he? He is perfect, Cole told her, and he was surprised to find his own voice thick with emotion. He is perfect, and he is yours, and he is here. Sarah's trembling hand moved to touch her son's head, her fingers running over the soft, dark hair. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but these were tears of joy. We made it to dawn, she said, looking up at Cole with wonder in those green eyes. You stayed with me until dawn broke, and we made it. We made it, Cole confirmed, and he found himself smiling, really smiling, for the first time in longer than he could remember. You fought like a warrior, Sarah Brennan. Your son is lucky to have a mother as strong as you. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Mrs. Hadley tended to Sarah's injuries, cleaning and bandaging and administering medicines from her bag. The bleeding had stopped, though Sarah remained dangerously weak. Cole found himself unable to leave, making excuses about needing to wait for the storm to clear, about wanting to ensure Sarah's husband could be found and notified. The truth, which he was only beginning to admit to himself, was that he could not bear to walk away from this woman and her child. Something had happened during that long night of prayer and struggle. Some bond had been forged that he did not fully understand but could not deny. Every time he looked at Sarah, every time she looked back at him with gratitude and something else in her eyes, he felt that connection pull tighter. The baby, whom Sarah named Thomas after her late father, nursed successfully and slept peacefully in his mother's arms. Mrs. Hadley declared it another miracle, saying that by all rights the child should have been too weak to feed. But Thomas Brennan seemed determined to defy every expectation. Just as he had defied death itself to be born, around noon, the storm finally broke. The sun emerged from behind the clouds, turning the snow-covered prairie into a blinding field of white. Cole stepped outside to assess the conditions and to give Sarah and Mrs. Hadley some privacy. The cold air hit his lungs like a shock, waking him fully from the strange dreamlike state he'd been in since dawn. He thought about what came next. Sarah's husband would return and Cole would have to step aside. That was how it had to be, how it should be. Sarah was a married woman with a family, and he was just the marshal who'd happened to be there when she needed help. The fact that he'd felt more alive during those hours beside her bed than he had in years meant nothing. The fact that when she looked at him, he felt like he could be someone better than the hard man he'd become meant nothing. The sound of horses approaching broke through his thoughts. Cole turned to see two riders making their way through the deep snow toward the cabin. As they drew closer, he recognized one of them as Patrick Brennan, a slight man in his late 20s whom Cole had seen around Dodge City a few times. The other rider was Doc Wilkins from town, his medical bag strapped to his saddle. Patrick dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, stumbling through the snow toward Cole. "My wife," he gasped. "Is she?" "The storm trapped me in town, and when it finally broke, someone said you'd ridden out this way days ago. When I realized Sarah was alone except for Mrs. Hadley, I came as fast as I could. Please, Marshal, tell me she is alive." "She is alive," Cole assured him, and he was surprised by how difficult it was to say the next words. "You have a son, Patrick, born just after dawn this morning. Both mother and baby are doing well, though Sarah will need time to recover her strength." Patrick's face transformed with joy, and without warning he threw his arms around Cole in an embrace that the marshal awkwardly returned. "Thank God," Patrick breathed. Thank God, I have to see her, I have to see them both. Cole stepped aside, letting Patrick rush past him into the cabin. He heard Sarah's cry of relief and joy, heard the murmur of voices and the baby's fussing. Doc Wilkins dismounted more slowly, looking at Cole with assessment in his sharp eyes. Mrs. Hadley sent word with the Hendrickson boy that there were complications, the doctor said. She made it sound like Sarah would not survive the night. Mrs. Hadley did not think either Sarah or the baby would survive, Cole replied flatly. She was wrong. The doctor studied him for a long moment, then nodded and went inside to check on his patient. Cole remained outside, suddenly feeling like an intruder. His role in this story was over. Sarah had her husband now, had her child, had her life back. The fact that Cole's own life suddenly felt hollow and empty was his problem to deal with. He was preparing to mount his horse and ride back to Dodge City when the cabin door opened again. Mrs. Hadley emerged, bundled in her heavy coat, and made her way through the snow to his side. "You are leaving," she observed. "It was not a question. My work here is done," Cole said. "The family is together and the doctor can provide any care Sarah needs going forward. I should get back to town." Mrs. Hadley was quiet for a moment, her breath making clouds in the cold air. "I have delivered hundreds of babies, Marshal Thornton," she said finally. "I have seen every kind of birth and every kind of outcome, but I have never seen anything like what happened in that cabin last night. That baby should have died. Sarah should have died, but you prayed and they both lived. Do you understand what that means?" "It means they got lucky," Cole said, but his voice lacked conviction. "No," Mrs. Hadley said firmly. "It means you were supposed to be there. It means something bigger than both of us decided that Sarah and her baby deserved a chance and you were the instrument of that chance. The fact that you cannot see that tells me you are either very humble or very foolish." Cole looked back at the cabin where he could see movement through the small window. "She is married," he said quietly. "She has a family. Whatever I felt last night, whatever connection I thought I felt, it does not matter. She belongs with her husband." Mrs. Hadley made a small noise of understanding. "Ah," she said, "so that is how it is. Marshal, let me give you some advice from a woman who has lived 3 times as long as you have. What you felt last night was real. I saw it on both your faces. But you are right that Sarah belongs with her husband. She made vows and she will honor them. But that does not mean what happened last night meant nothing. You helped bring a child into this world and you gave a mother the courage to fight for her baby's life. That changes you, whether you want it to or not." Before Cole could respond, the cabin door opened again and Patrick emerged. He crossed to Cole with purpose in his stride and the marshal tensed, unsure what to expect. But Patrick just extended his hand, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Thank you," Patrick said simply. "Mrs. Hadley told me what you did. She said you stayed up all night praying for Sarah and Thomas. She said you gave my wife the strength to keep fighting when she wanted to give up. I do not have adequate words to express my gratitude, Marshal Thornton. You gave me back my family." Cole shook the offered hand, finding Patrick's grip stronger than he'd expected. "I did what anyone would have done," he said, though they both knew that was not true. "No," Patrick said firmly. "You did something extraordinary. Sarah wants to see you before you go. She is asking for you." Every instinct Cole had told him to decline, to ride away and let this family have their reunion without his presence as a complication. But he found himself nodding and following Patrick back into the cabin, drawn by a force he could not resist. Sarah was sitting up in bed now, propped on pillows with baby Thomas cradled in her arms. Doc Wilkins was packing up his medical bag, looking satisfied with whatever he'd found during his examination. Sarah's face was still pale, but there was color in her cheeks that had not been there before, and her green eyes were alert and focused. When she saw Cole, her face transformed with a smile that hit him like a physical blow. "Marshal Thornton," she said softly. "Patrick told me that you are leaving. I wanted to thank you properly before you go." Cole moved closer to the bed, aware of Patrick standing right behind him, of Mrs. Hadley and Doc Wilkins watching from their positions around the small room. "There is no need for thanks," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "I am just glad that you and Thomas are safe." "No need for thanks," Sarah repeated, and despite her weakness, there was steel in her voice. "Marshal, you saved my son's life. You saved my life. You stayed beside me through the darkest night of my existence and gave me the courage to keep fighting. I will never forget that. Thomas will never forget it. You are part of our family now, whether you want to be or not." Cole felt his throat tighten with emotion he did not know how to express. "He is a beautiful child," he managed. "You should be very proud." "Would you like to hold him?" Sarah asked, and before Cole could protest, she was holding the baby out toward him. "Please, I want you to hold him." Cole had never held a baby before in his life. His hands, which could draw and fire a pistol faster than most men could blink, trembled as he accepted the tiny bundle from Sarah's arms. Thomas was surprisingly light, surprisingly warm, and when Cole looked down at the infant's face, the baby's eyes opened and seemed to stare directly at him. "He knows you," Sarah said softly. "He knows your voice. You were there when he was born, when he took his first breath. That creates a bond that can never be broken." Cole stared at the child in his arms, at this small miracle that should not exist. He thought about the prayers he'd whispered through the night, about the desperate bargains he'd tried to make with a God he was not sure he believed in. And he thought about the moment when Thomas had drawn his first breath, when that tiny cry had split the dawn air, and how Cole's entire world had shifted on its axis. "I will never forget this night," Cole said, speaking to Sarah but unable to look away from the baby. "I will never forget either of you." He reluctantly handed Thomas back to his mother, then stepped away from the bed. Patrick moved in immediately, sitting beside his wife and putting his arm around her shoulders, the three of them forming a perfect picture of family. Cole felt like an intruder witnessing something too intimate for outsiders. "I should go," he said. "Sarah, you need to rest. Patrick, take care of them both." "Marshal," Sarah called as he turned toward the door. When he looked back, her eyes were intense, burning with something he could not quite name. "Will you come back, to check on us? Thomas should know the man who helped bring him into this world." Cole knew he should refuse, knew that coming back would only make the ache in his chest worse. But he found himself nodding anyway. "I will check on you," he promised. "Give you time to recover, but yes, I will come back." The ride back to Dodge City took most of the afternoon, the snow making the going slow and difficult. Cole had plenty of time to think, to turn over the events of the past 24 hours in his mind. He tried to make sense of what he was feeling, this strange mixture of joy and grief, of fulfillment and loss. He had never believed in love at first sight, had always considered it a romantic notion with no basis in reality. But something had happened in that cabin, something that defied logic and reason. In the space of one night, Sarah Brennan had become important to him in a way he could not explain. The fact that she was married, that she loved her husband and had a child with him, did not change the truth of what Cole felt. He told himself it would fade. That once he returned to his regular life, to the routine of keeping peace in Dodge City, these feelings would diminish and eventually disappear. He would remember Sarah and Thomas fondly, would be glad he could help them, but the intensity of his emotions would cool into something more reasonable and appropriate. He was wrong. The weeks that followed were the longest of Cole's life. He threw himself into his work with renewed intensity, taking on extra patrols and volunteering for the most dangerous assignments. He broke up fights in the saloons, arrested cattle rustlers, and faced down a gang of outlaws who tried to rob the bank. Through it all, Sarah's face haunted him. Her green eyes appeared in his dreams. Her voice echoed in his memories. The feeling of her hand gripping his as she fought to bring her baby into the world replayed in his mind until he thought he might go mad. 3 weeks after that terrible night, Cole received a message that Patrick Brennan wanted to see him. His heart hammered as he rode out to the homestead, his mind racing through possibilities. Was something wrong with Sarah? With the baby? Had Patrick somehow figured out Cole's inappropriate feelings for his wife? But when he arrived at the cabin, Patrick greeted him with a genuine smile and a firm handshake. Sarah was up and moving around, still pale but clearly recovering her strength. Thomas was asleep in a cradle near the fire, having grown noticeably even in the short time since Cole had last seen him. "Marshal Thornton," Patrick said warmly. "Thank you for coming. Sarah and I have been discussing something, and we wanted to talk to you about it." Cole felt a sense of dread settle in his stomach, but he nodded and followed Patrick inside. Sarah smiled when she saw him, that same radiant smile that made his heart clench, and gestured for him to sit at the small table. Patrick poured coffee for all of them, and then the young couple exchanged a look that spoke of long conversations and mutual understanding. "Marshal," Sarah began, her voice steady and clear, "Patrick and I want to ask you to be Thomas's godfather. We know that is typically a role reserved for family or very close friends, but you are both to us now. You were there when Thomas was born. You prayed for him. You gave us both the courage to fight for his life. We cannot imagine anyone more appropriate to help guide him as he grows." Cole was stunned into silence. Of all the things he'd expected them to say, this had not been among them. He looked from Sarah to Patrick and back again, searching for some sign that this was not genuine, but he found only sincere hope in their faces. "I am honored," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "But I am not sure I am the right choice. I am not a particularly religious man and my life is dangerous. I cannot make promises about always being here for Thomas." "We are not asking for promises," Patrick said gently. "We are asking you to be part of our family in whatever way you can. Sarah told me about the conversations you had during that long night, about the things you shared with each other. She says you are a good man, Marshal, one who deserves a family of his own. Until you have that family, we would be honored if you would consider us yours." Cole felt something break open inside his chest, something he'd kept carefully locked away for years. He looked at Sarah and saw understanding in her eyes, saw that she somehow knew exactly how he felt and why this offer meant so much to him. "Yes," he said quietly, "I would be honored to be Thomas's godfather." Sarah's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. She rose from her chair and crossed to the cradle, carefully lifting the sleeping baby and bringing him to Cole. "Then hold your godson," she said softly. "And know that you will always have a place in this family, Marshal Thornton, always." Cole took Thomas in his arms again, marveling at how the child had grown, how much more substantial he felt. The baby stirred but did not wake, just settled against Cole's chest with a small sigh of contentment. And in that moment, Cole understood what Mrs. Hadley had tried to tell him. He had been changed by what happened in this cabin. He was no longer just the hard man who kept order in Dodge City. He was someone who had fought for a life, who had witnessed a miracle, who had a family that wanted him. The arrangement became a routine. Cole visited the Brennan homestead regularly, bringing supplies from town and checking on the family's welfare. He watched Thomas grow from a tiny newborn into a chubby, smiling infant who seemed to recognize Cole's voice and reach for him whenever he arrived. Sarah regained her strength slowly but steadily, and Cole found himself looking forward to their conversations as much as he looked forward to holding Thomas. Patrick never seemed jealous or suspicious of the time Cole spent at the homestead. If anything, he seemed genuinely grateful for the Marshal's presence, for the protection and support he provided. The young farmer was busy with spring planting, trying to make his homestead profitable enough to support his growing family, and he appreciated having another man around to help with the heavier work. But Cole and Sarah were careful. They never spoke of the bond that had formed between them that night, never acknowledged the way their eyes would meet across the room or the way their hands would sometimes brush when passing Thomas back and forth. They both knew there were lines that could not be crossed, vows that could not be broken, and they honored those boundaries with painful conscientiousness. Summer came, turning the prairie into a sea of grass and wildflowers. Thomas was 6 months old, healthy and happy, a constant reminder of the miracle that had occurred in the darkest hours before dawn. Cole had become a regular fixture at the Brennan homestead, eating dinner with the family at least once a week, attending church with them on Sundays. It was after one such Sunday service, in early August of 1879, that Cole's carefully constructed world began to fall apart. He was helping Patrick repair a section of fence when a rider approached at a gallop, dust streaming behind his horse. Cole recognized the man as one of his deputies from Dodge City, and the urgency in his riding style set off alarm bells. "Marshal," the deputy called as he reined in his lathered horse. "You need to get back to town right now. There has been a shooting, multiple casualties. The mayor is asking for you specifically." Cole felt duty pulling at him, but he looked back at the cabin where Sarah was probably putting Thomas down for his afternoon nap. The thought of leaving without saying goodbye felt wrong, but his deputy's expression told him there was no time. "Go," Patrick said, reading his hesitation. "We will be fine here. Go to your job, Marshal." Cole mounted his horse and followed his deputy toward town, but something nagged at him. Some instinct that had kept him alive through countless dangerous situations was screaming that something was wrong. He ignored it, focusing on the crisis in town, on the people who needed his help. The shooting turned out to be a dispute between two cattle outfits that had spilled over into town. 3 men were dead, 5 more wounded, and it took Cole and his deputies most of the evening to sort out what had happened and arrest the responsible parties. By the time he was finished, the sun was setting and he was exhausted down to his bones. He was writing up his report in his office when one of the saloon girls burst through the door, her face pale with fear. "Marshal," she gasped. "There are men at the Brennan homestead. I heard them talking in the saloon earlier, making plans. They said Patrick Brennan testified against them in a cattle-rustling trial last year, and now that he is isolated out there with his family, they could get their revenge." Cole felt ice water flood his veins. He did not wait to hear more, just grabbed his rifle and ran for his horse. 2 of his deputies followed without being asked, and the 3 lawmen rode hard toward the Brennan homestead as the sun sank below the horizon. Cole pushed his horse harder than he should have, fear driving him forward with merciless intensity. He kept seeing Sarah's face, kept hearing Thomas's laugh, kept imagining what might be happening at that isolated cabin. His prayers, rusty from disuse despite the miracle he'd witnessed, poured out in a desperate stream as he rode. They saw the smoke first, a dark column rising against the twilight sky. Cole's heart stopped, then started beating double time. He spurred his horse faster, ignoring his deputy's shouts to wait, to be careful. All he could think about was Sarah and Thomas, about Patrick trying to defend his family against men who had come for blood. The cabin was on fire when Cole arrived, flames licking up the sides and consuming the roof. 3 men on horseback were circling the building, firing shots through the windows. Cole did not hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired, dropping one of the attackers from his saddle. The other 2 wheeled their horses toward him, raising their own weapons, but his deputies were right behind him now, adding their firepower to his. The gunfight was brief and brutal. One of the attackers died in a hail of bullets. The other tried to flee but was brought down by one of Cole's deputies. And through it all, Cole's focus was on the burning cabin, on the desperate need to get inside and find Sarah and Thomas and Patrick. He dismounted while his horse was still moving and ran toward the cabin door. The heat was intense, the smoke thick and choking, but he did not hesitate. He kicked the door open and plunged inside, shouting Sarah's name. The interior was an inferno. Flames raced across the ceiling and walls, consuming everything they touched. Through the smoke, Cole could see Patrick's body lying near the overturned table, blood pooling beneath him. But there was no sign of Sarah or Thomas. "Sarah," Cole roared, his voice barely audible over the roar of the fire. "Sarah, where are you?" A sound reached him from the far corner, near the bedroom. Cole crossed the burning room in 3 strides, ignoring the way his clothes were beginning to smolder, the way the heat was blistering his skin. He found Sarah huddled in the corner, clutching Thomas to her chest, her body curled protectively around her son. She was conscious but coughing violently, and when she saw Cole, relief flooded her face. "I cannot get out," she gasped. "Patrick told me to hide here with Thomas." He tried to fight them, but there were too many. "Cole, I cannot get out." Cole did not waste time with words. He scooped Sarah and Thomas up in his arms, feeling Sarah wrap her free arm around his neck while maintaining her death grip on the baby with the other. Then he turned and ran back through the inferno, his lungs burning, his eyes streaming tears from the smoke. The cabin roof collapsed just as Cole burst through the door, showering sparks and burning debris into the night sky. He carried Sarah and Thomas well away from the burning building before carefully setting them down in the grass. Thomas was crying, terrified but alive. Sarah was coughing so hard she could not speak, her face black with soot, her dress singed and torn. Cole's deputies rushed over with water and blankets. They wrapped Sarah and Thomas while Cole stood there, swaying on his feet, trying to process what had just happened. Then Sarah's words from inside the cabin hit him with full force. "Patrick," he said hoarsely. "Sarah, Patrick was inside." "I saw him, he was near the table." Sarah's face crumpled, and she let out a wail of grief that cut through Cole like a blade. "He is dead," she sobbed. "They shot him as soon as they broke down the door. He told me to take Thomas and hide. He told me he loved me. And then they shot him, and the fire started, and I could not reach him. I could not save him." Cole dropped to his knees beside her, pulling both Sarah and Thomas into his arms. Sarah collapsed against his chest, her body racked with sobs while the baby wailed between them. Cole held them both, his own tears mixing with the soot on his face, and watched the cabin burn. Patrick's body was still inside, being consumed by the flames along with everything the young family had built together. The night became a blur of activity. Doc Wilkins arrived and tended to Sarah's and Thomas's smoke inhalation and minor burns. The deputies dealt with the bodies of the attackers and tried to salvage anything from the fire, though there was little left to save. Someone rode to fetch Mrs. Hadley, who came and took charge of Sarah and the baby with gentle efficiency. Through it all, Cole stood watch. He could not seem to make himself leave, could not force his feet to carry him away from Sarah and Thomas. Every time he tried, he remembered finding them huddled in that corner, remembered the terror on Sarah's face, remembered how close he'd come to losing them both, as dawn broke. Another dawn, Cole thought with bitter irony. Mrs. Hadley approached him with a steaming cup of coffee. "You saved them," she said quietly. "If you had been even a few minutes later, they would have died in that fire." "Patrick is dead," Cole said flatly. "I did not save him." "You could not have saved Patrick," Mrs. Hadley said firmly. "He was dead before you even knew there was trouble." "But you saved Sarah and Thomas, and that is what Patrick would have wanted. He died protecting his family. He died knowing that someone he trusted would take care of them if he could not." Cole looked over at Sarah, who was sitting on a blanket with Thomas in her arms, staring at the smoking ruins of her home with hollow eyes. "What happens to them now?" he asked. "She has no family here, no home, no means of supporting herself and the baby." Mrs. Hadley gave him a long, measured look. "That depends," she said carefully. "On what you are prepared to do, Marshal Thornton." Cole understood what she was suggesting, and part of him recoiled from it. Patrick had been dead for less than 12 hours. It was wrong to even think about such things now, disrespectful to his memory. But another part of Cole, the practical part that had kept him alive on the frontier, knew that Sarah and Thomas needed protection. They needed someone to care for them, to provide for them. "It is too soon," he said. "People would talk. They would say terrible things about Sarah." "People will talk no matter what you do," Mrs. Hadley replied. "But Sarah and Thomas need someone, and you care about them. More than that, they care about you. I saw it months ago, the bond between you." Patrick saw it too, and he was grateful for it. He told me once that knowing you were watching over his family gave him peace of mind. Cole absorbed this information silently. Around them, the sky continued to lighten, revealing the full extent of the destruction. The cabin was nothing but charred timbers and ash. Everything the Brennans had built together was gone, reduced to ruins in a single night of violence. Sarah rose from her blanket and walked slowly toward the remains of the cabin, still holding Thomas. Cole moved to intercept her, afraid she might try to go into the ruins, but she stopped at the edge of the burned area and just stood there, swaying slightly. "He deserved better," she said when Cole reached her side. Her voice was hoarse from smoke and crying. "Patrick was a good man, a gentle man. He never hurt anyone. He just wanted to build a life for us here to make something lasting, and now he is gone and there is nothing left." "You are left," Cole said quietly, "and Thomas, Patrick's son, that is not nothing, Sarah." She turned to look at him, and the devastation in her eyes nearly broke him. "I do not know how to do this," she whispered. "I do not know how to be without him. We were supposed to grow old together. We were supposed to watch Thomas grow up. We were supposed to have more children. How do I do this alone?" Cole wanted to tell her that she was not alone, that he would be there for her and Thomas, but the words stuck in his throat. It felt wrong to offer himself as a replacement for Patrick so soon after the man's death. Instead, he just reached out and gently touched her shoulder, offering what comfort he could through simple presence. Thomas began to fuss, his small face scrunching up in preparation for a full cry. Sarah automatically began to rock him, her movements mechanical but effective. "He is hungry," she said dully. "I need to feed him, but where? Everything is gone, his cradle, his blankets, his clothes, everything." "My house," Cole heard himself say. "I have a house in town. It is not large, but it has 2 bedrooms and a good stove. You and Thomas can stay there until you figure out what you want to do next." Sarah stared at him. "I cannot impose on you like that. You have already done so much." "You are not imposing," Cole said firmly. "You are family. You said so yourself, remember? And family takes care of each other." For the first time since the previous night, a flicker of something other than grief crossed Sarah's face. "Thomas's godfather," she said softly. "Yes, you are right. We are family." Moving Sarah and Thomas into Cole's small house in Dodge City caused exactly the kind of talk Mrs. Hadley had predicted. The upstanding citizens of the town saw nothing wrong with the marshal taking in a widow and her infant son, but the less charitable residents whispered about impropriety and unseemly haste. Cole heard the rumors and ignored them. His only concern was ensuring that Sarah and Thomas had what they needed. Sarah spent the first weeks in a fog of grief. She functioned. She cared for Thomas, ate when food was placed in front of her, accepted the donations of clothing and supplies that poured in from sympathetic townspeople. But there was no light in her eyes. She moved through Cole's house like a ghost, there but not really present. Cole gave her space while simultaneously trying to provide support. He hired a woman from town to come during the days to help with Thomas and to provide female companionship for Sarah. He made sure there was always food in the house, wood for the fire, everything they might need. And he spent his evenings sitting in the small parlor with Sarah, not saying much, just being present. Thomas, at least, continued to thrive. The baby seemed unaffected by the trauma, growing and developing right on schedule. He smiled readily, babbled happily, and reached for Cole whenever the marshal came home in the evening. That, more than anything, kept Cole grounded during those difficult weeks. No matter how bad his day had been, no matter how many drunken cowboys he'd had to deal with or disputes he'd had to settle, Thomas's smile made everything worthwhile. It was a month after Patrick's death when Sarah finally broke down. Cole came home one evening to find her sitting on the floor of his bedroom, the one she was using, surrounded by the few items that had been salvaged from the fire. She was holding Patrick's pocket watch, one of the only things that had survived the flames, and she was sobbing with the kind of raw, broken grief that Cole had never heard from another human being. He did not hesitate. He crossed the room and sank down beside her, pulling her into his arms. Sarah collapsed against him, her fingers clutching his shirt, and cried with an intensity that shook her entire body. Cole just held her, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring meaningless sounds of comfort. "I miss him," Sarah gasped when she could finally form words. "I miss him so much, Cole. I wake up in the morning and for a moment I forget he is gone and then I remember and it feels like being stabbed. How do I live with this? How do I wake up every day knowing he is never coming back?" "I do not know," Cole admitted, his own voice rough. "I wish I had answers for you, Sarah, but I do not. All I know is that you are stronger than you think you are. You have already survived so much. You will survive this too." "I do not want to be strong," Sarah said bitterly. "I want my husband back. I want Thomas to know his father. I want the life we were supposed to have." Cole tightened his arms around her, wishing he could take her pain away and knowing he could not. "Patrick loved you," he said quietly. "He loved you and Thomas more than anything, and he died protecting you. That is not meaningless, Sarah. That matters." Sarah pulled back slightly to look at him, her face wet with tears, her eyes red and swollen. "I know you have feelings for me," she said bluntly, and Cole froze. "I have known since that night, since you stayed beside me and prayed for Thomas. Patrick knew too, we talked about it." Cole felt panic rise in his chest. "Sarah, I would never have, I know," she interrupted. "I know you would never have acted on those feelings while Patrick was alive. You are too honorable for that, but he is gone now and I need to understand what this is, what we are to each other. Because I cannot keep living in your house, accepting your charity without being honest about what I feel." Cole's heart was hammering so hard he was sure Sarah could hear it. "What do you feel?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Sarah looked down at the pocket watch in her hand, then back up at Cole. "I loved Patrick," she said firmly. "I loved him with all my heart, and I will always love him. He was my husband, the father of my child, but you, Cole Thornton, you are something else. You have been part of my life since the moment Thomas was born. You gave me strength when I had none left. You saved my life twice now, and when I look at you, I feel something that I do not know how to name. Something that existed even while Patrick was alive, though I never would have acknowledged it then." Cole felt like his entire world was shifting beneath him. "You are grieving," he said, trying to give them both an out. "You are confused and hurt and looking for something stable to hold on to. What you feel right now might not be real." "Do not tell me what I feel," Sarah said, and there was steel in her voice despite the tears still streaking her face. "I am a grown woman, Cole. I know my own heart. Yes, I am grieving. Yes, I am confused and hurt. But I also know that what I feel when I look at you is real. It was real that night, it was real when Patrick was alive, and it is real now." Cole swallowed hard. "Even if that is true, even if what you feel is real, it is too soon. People are already talking about us. If we were to pursue anything now, they would crucify you. They would say terrible things. They would call you a woman of loose morals who moved from one man's bed to another before her husband was even cold in his grave." "I do not care what people say," Sarah said, but Cole shook his head. "You should care. You have to live in this town. Thomas has to grow up here. I will not let you be ostracized and shamed because of me." He took a deep breath, making a decision that hurt more than any bullet wound he'd ever taken. "You and Thomas will stay here as long as you need to. I will provide for you, protect you, be whatever you need me to be, but we cannot be more than that. Not now. Maybe not ever. I will not let you sacrifice your reputation for me." Sarah stared at him for a long moment, and Cole saw a dozen emotions flicker across her face. Anger, grief, frustration, and finally, reluctant understanding. "You are probably right," she said quietly. "But Cole, I want you to know something. When enough time has passed, when it would not be scandalous, I want us to be honest about what this is. I want a chance to see if what we feel can become something more. Can you promise me that?" Cole reached out and cupped her face gently with his hand, his thumb brushing away her tears. "I promise," he said. "When enough time has passed, when you have had a chance to properly grieve for Patrick, we will be honest about this. We will figure out what we are to each other." Sarah closed her eyes and leaned into his touch. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for everything." Cole pulled her back into his arms, and they sat there on the floor together, holding each other while night fell outside. It was not romantic, it was not even particularly comfortable. But it was real and it was honest, and for now, that was enough. The next several months passed slowly. Sarah gradually came back to herself, her grief transforming from the sharp, cutting pain of new loss into something more manageable, more bearable. She began helping around Cole's house, cooking meals and tidying up, insisting that if she was going to stay there, she would at least earn her keep. She started attending church again, holding her head high despite the whispers and sideways glances. Thomas grew rapidly, passing his first birthday in January of 1880. The boy was walking now, toddling around Cole's house with determined steps, getting into everything. He called Cole Papa Cole, which made the Marshal's heart clench every time he heard it. Sarah gently tried to correct him, to teach him to call Cole Godfather or just Cole, but the boy was stubborn, and the name stuck. Cole and Sarah were scrupulously careful about maintaining propriety. They were never alone together without Thomas present. Sarah continued to sleep in Cole's bedroom while the Marshal took the smaller room. They attended social functions separately and sat apart during church services. Every action was calculated to prevent scandal, to show the town that their relationship was purely one of guardian and ward. But in private, in the quiet moments when Thomas was asleep and they sat together in the small parlor, they talked. They shared their histories, their dreams, their fears. Cole told Sarah about his childhood in Texas, about the violence and hardship that had shaped him. Sarah told Cole about growing up in Missouri, about the poverty that had driven her family west in search of better opportunities. "Patrick and I were not a love match at first," Sarah admitted one evening in March, nearly a year since that terrible night when Thomas was born. "Our parents introduced us because they thought we would suit each other, and we did suit each other. We became friends first, and then we fell in love slowly, gradually. It was comfortable and safe and good." Cole listened carefully, knowing that this was important, that Sarah needed to say these things. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Marrying him?" "Never," Sarah said firmly. "Patrick gave me a good life. He loved me truly. He gave me Thomas. I will never regret the time we had together, even though it was cut short. But Cole, what I felt for Patrick, what I feel for you, they are different things. Not better or worse, just different. Is that wrong? Should I feel guilty for that?" "No," Cole said. "Love is not a finite resource, Sarah. You can love Patrick's memory and still have feelings for me. The two things can exist together." Sarah reached over and took his hand, a gesture that had become comfortable between them over the months. "I want you to know that I am ready," she said quietly. "I have grieved for Patrick. I will always carry him in my heart, always honor his memory, but I am ready to move forward. I am ready to be honest about what I want." Cole's breath caught. "And what do you want?" Sarah met his eyes steadily. "I want a life with you if you will have me. I want Thomas to grow up calling you Papa without any qualifications. I want more children if God blesses us with them. I want to build something lasting with you, the way Patrick and I were trying to build something before it was taken from us." Cole stood and crossed to where Sarah sat, pulling her to her feet. They stood there, inches apart, and Cole could see his own hunger reflected in Sarah's green eyes. "It has been over a year," he said. "People will still talk, but they will not be able to say we acted with unseemly haste. And I do not think I can wait any longer, Sarah. I have been in love with you since that night, since I saw you fighting for Thomas's life. I have tried to hide it, tried to be patient, but I love you. I want you to be my wife." Sarah's face transformed with joy. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, Cole. I will marry you." Cole closed the remaining distance between them and kissed her for the first time. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise, and when they finally pulled apart, both of them were trembling. "I will do right by you," Cole promised. "I will be a good husband to you and a good father to Thomas. I swear it on everything I hold sacred." "I know you will," Sarah said, reaching up to touch his face. "You already have been. You have been my strength and my support through the darkest time of my life." "I trust you completely, Cole Thornton." They were married in April of 1880 in a simple ceremony at the church in Dodge City. Mrs. Hadley stood as Sarah's witness, and one of Cole's deputies stood as his. Thomas toddled up and down the aisle during the service, making everyone laugh, and when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Sarah was crying tears of joy instead of grief. The townspeople did talk, as expected, but the gossip was more curious than cruel. Most people seemed to think it was natural for the widow to marry the man who had saved her life, the man who had already been caring for her and her child. A few of the more rigid citizens sniffed and muttered about impropriety, but their voices were drowned out by the general approval. Cole moved back into his own bedroom, this time with Sarah beside him. That first night as husband and wife, they came together with a mixture of tenderness and passion that left them both breathless. Sarah cried afterward, but when Cole started to pull away, concerned he'd hurt her, she pulled him back. "These are good tears," she assured him. "I am happy, Cole, truly happy. I did not think I would ever feel this way again after Patrick died, but you have given me back joy. You have given me back hope." Cole kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "You have given me the same," he said. "Before you, I was just going through the motions. I thought I had a good life, but I was wrong. This, right here, this is what a good life feels like." They settled into married life with surprising ease. Sarah proved to be an excellent homemaker, keeping Cole's small house spotless and filling it with the kind of warmth and life it had never known. Thomas thrived with two parents who adored him, growing into a bright, curious boy who asked endless questions and got into constant mischief. Cole discovered that he loved being a father. He had worried that he would not know how to relate to a child, that his rough edges and dangerous profession would make him unsuitable for the role. But Thomas brought out a gentleness in him that he had not known he possessed. He taught the boy to ride, to fish in the Arkansas River, to recognize different bird calls. He told him stories about the Old West, carefully edited versions that left out the blood and violence. In the fall of 1880, Sarah told Cole she was pregnant. They had not been trying to prevent it, but they had not been actively trying either, so the news came as a wonderful surprise. Cole was overjoyed and terrified in equal measure, remembering all too vividly the terrible night when Thomas was born. "This will be different," Sarah assured him, seeing the fear in his eyes. "I am stronger now, healthier, and we have a doctor right here in town. Nothing bad is going to happen." But Cole could not shake his worry. As Sarah's pregnancy progressed, he found himself watching her constantly, looking for any sign of trouble. He insisted she rest frequently, that she not overexert herself. Sarah tolerated his hovering with amused patience, understanding that his fear came from a place of love. When Sarah's labor began in May of 1881, Cole was beside himself. He paced the small house like a caged animal while Doc Wilkins and Mrs. Hadley attended to Sarah in the bedroom. He could hear Sarah's cries of pain through the door, and each one felt like a knife to his heart. Thomas, now 2 years old, sat on the floor playing with wooden blocks, oblivious to his father's distress. Cole tried to focus on the boy, tried to stay calm for his sake, but his mind kept replaying that night 2 years ago, kept imagining all the things that could go wrong when Mrs. Hadley finally emerged from the bedroom. Cole was on his feet instantly. The old woman was smiling, and the sight of it made his knees weak with relief. "You have a daughter," she announced. "A healthy, beautiful baby girl, and Sarah is tired but fine. It was a normal birth, Marshal. No complications, no drama, everything is exactly as it should be." Cole sagged against the wall, his relief so intense it was almost painful. "Can I see them?" he managed. "Of course," Mrs. Hadley said warmly. "Go meet your daughter." Cole entered the bedroom on unsteady legs. Sarah was propped up on pillows, looking exhausted but radiant, and in her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. Cole crossed to the bed and sat carefully on the edge, staring in wonder at his daughter's tiny face. "She is perfect," he whispered. "Sarah, she is absolutely perfect." "We made her together," Sarah said softly. "This is our daughter, Cole, our family." Cole reached out with one finger to touch the baby's soft cheek, and her eyes opened, revealing the same green as her mother's. "What should we name her?" he asked. Sarah smiled. "I was thinking Grace," she said. "For the grace that brought us together, that saved me and Thomas, that gave us this life." "Grace," Cole repeated, testing the name. "Grace Thornton. It is perfect." Thomas was allowed in to meet his new sister a few minutes later. The toddler approached the bed cautiously, his eyes wide with curiosity. "Baby?" he asked, pointing at the bundle in Sarah's arms. "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah said. "This is your baby sister, Grace. You are going to be her big brother. Can you help us take care of her?" Thomas nodded solemnly, then reached out to touch Grace's tiny hand. The baby's fingers curled around his, and Thomas's face lit up with delight. "My baby," he declared. Cole watched his wife and children with a sense of contentment so profound it almost hurt. 2 years ago, he had been a lonely man with nothing but his work to define him. Now he had a family, people who loved him and needed him, a reason to come home every night. The journey to this moment had been painful and complicated, built on tragedy and loss, but Cole could not regret any of it. Every moment had led him here, to this perfect present. Life settled into a new rhythm after Grace's birth. The small house that had felt cramped with just Cole and Sarah and Thomas became even more crowded, but no one minded. They were a family, complete and happy, and they made it work. Cole added a room onto the house that summer, giving Thomas his own space and allowing Grace to have a proper nursery. The years passed with the kind of gentle contentment that Cole had never imagined possible. Thomas grew from a toddler into a young boy, attending the school that had been established in Dodge City and proving himself bright and curious. Grace developed into a sweet, gentle child who adored her big brother and followed him everywhere. In 1883, Sarah gave Cole another child, a son they named Patrick in honor of Sarah's first husband. Cole had suggested the name, wanting to ensure that Thomas never forgot his birth father, and Sarah had cried with gratitude and love. Young Patrick looked nothing like his namesake. He had Cole's dark hair and serious eyes, but he carried the name with pride as he grew. Cole continued his work as Marshal, but he was more careful now, less willing to take unnecessary risks. He had too much to lose, too many people depending on him. He trained his deputies well, delegated more, and made sure he came home every night to his family. Sarah blossomed in her role as wife and mother. The scared young woman who had nearly died giving birth to Thomas seemed like someone from another lifetime. She was confident now, capable, the anchor of their family. She ran their household with cheerful efficiency, raised their children with love and wisdom, and loved Cole with a steadiness that never wavered. On Thomas's 6th birthday in 1882, Cole sat the boy down for a serious conversation. Thomas was old enough now to understand certain things, and Cole wanted to be honest with him about the past. "Thomas," he began carefully, "you know that I am not your birth father, correct? You know that your first father was named Patrick, like your little brother?" Thomas nodded seriously. He was a thoughtful child, more inclined to listen than to speak. "Mama told me," he said. "She said my first papa died protecting us from bad men." "That is right," Cole confirmed. "Your first father was a very brave man, Thomas. He loved you and your mother more than anything in the world. I want you to know about him, to remember him, even though you were too young when he died to have memories of your own." Thomas considered this for a moment. "Do you remember him?" he asked. "I did not know him well," Cole admitted, "but I know he was a good man. And I know that he trusted me to take care of you and your mother if anything happened to him. That is why I am your father now, because he asked me to be, in a way." Thomas reached out and took Cole's hand, his small fingers wrapping around the Marshal's larger ones. "I am glad you are my papa," he said simply. "I am glad my first papa asked you to take care of us. Cole felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I am glad too, son, I am glad too." As the children grew, they heard the story of Thomas's birth many times. It became a family legend, the tale of the terrible night when the baby was not supposed to survive, when the cowboy prayed beside the mother until dawn broke. Sarah told it with drama and emotion, making Cole out to be a hero. Cole protested every time, insisting he had just done what anyone would have done, but the children loved the story anyway. "Tell us again about how you saved Mama and me," Thomas would beg, and Sarah would smile and begin the tale again. She never left out the parts about Patrick, never allowed his memory to be erased or forgotten. He was woven into the story as the brave husband and father who had fought to protect his family. And Thomas grew up knowing that he had been loved by two fathers, both of whom had been good men. Grace and Patrick heard the story too as they got old enough to understand. They were fascinated by the dramatic tale of their older brother's birth, by the miracle that had saved him. "Does God answer all prayers like that?" Grace asked once, when she was about 5 years old. "Not always," Sarah said honestly. "Sometimes God's answer is no, or wait, or I have something different planned. But that night, God's answer was yes. He sent your father to us when we needed him most, and he helped us all survive something that should have killed us. That is why we never take our family for granted, why we appreciate every day we have together." In 1885, when Thomas was 7, Grace was 4, and Patrick was 2, Sarah told Cole she was pregnant again. They were both delighted, though Cole's old worries surfaced briefly. But Sarah's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and in early 1886, she gave birth to twin girls that they named Hope and Faith. "Grace, Hope, and Faith," Mrs. Hadley said with a chuckle when she came to check on the new mothers and babies. "You are covering all the virtues, Sarah." "We have a lot to be grateful for," Sarah replied, looking around at her crowded, chaotic, perfect family. "These names remind us of that." With 5 children, Cole's house was bursting at the seams. He added on 2 more rooms, turning the modest dwelling into a sprawling family home. The Marshal's salary was supplemented by the small farm Sarah managed with the older children's help, raising chickens and keeping a vegetable garden. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. Thomas grew into a fine young man, serious and thoughtful like his godfather, but with a gentle humor that he'd inherited from Patrick. He had vague memories of the homestead fire, of the night his birth father died, but they were more like impressions than clear recollections. What he remembered clearly was Cole's steady presence, Sarah's love, and the security of growing up in a family that, despite its complicated origins, was whole and strong. On Thomas's 18th birthday in 1894, Cole gave him Patrick's pocket watch, the one that had survived the fire. "This belonged to your first father," Cole said, pressing the tarnished timepiece into Thomas's hand. "He was carrying it the night he died, protecting you and your mother. I want you to have it now to remember him by." Thomas held the watch carefully, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Thank you, Papa Cole," he said quietly. "I will treasure this always." "Your first father would be proud of the man you have become," Cole continued. "You have his gentleness, his sense of honor, and you have your mother's strength and courage. You carry the best of both your parents forward." Thomas looked at the man who had raised him, the man who had been his father in every way that mattered. "And I have your steadiness," he said, "your sense of justice, your ability to do what is right even when it is hard. I carry that forward too." Cole pulled his son into a tight embrace, his heart full to bursting. This was what he had prayed for on that terrible night so many years ago. Not just for Thomas to survive, but for him to thrive, to grow into a good man, to have a life full of love and opportunity. And his prayers had been answered beyond anything he could have imagined. Sarah came to stand beside them, her hand resting on Cole's shoulder. At 41, she was still beautiful, though her hair now held streaks of gray and lines of laughter bracketed her mouth and eyes. She had lived a full life, had known both terrible loss and profound joy, and it showed in every aspect of who she was. I have been thinking, she said quietly, about that night. About the night Thomas was born. Mrs. Hadley told me the baby would not survive. She told you the same thing. But you refused to accept it. You prayed beside me until dawn broke and you gave me the strength to keep fighting. Everything good in my life now, everything beautiful, comes from that night, from your refusal to give up. Cole turned to face his wife, seeing the love and gratitude shining in her green eyes. I did not do anything special, he protested, as he always did when this subject came up. I just stayed, I just prayed, anyone could have done the same. But anyone did not, Sarah said firmly. You did. You were there when I needed you most, and you have been there every day since. You saved my life twice, Cole Thornton. You saved my son. And then you gave me a life worth living. You gave me love and children and a family. How can I ever thank you enough for that? Cole cupped her face gently with his hands, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. You do not need to thank me, he said softly. You have given me everything too. Before you, I was half alive, just going through the motions. You made me whole, Sarah, you and the children. You gave my life meaning. They kissed then, a sweet kiss full of history and love and promise, while Thomas smiled and slipped quietly away to give his parents privacy. Through the windows of their home, they could hear the other children playing in the yard, their laughter ringing out like music. In 1896, 2 years after Thomas received the pocket watch, Cole decided it was time to retire from his position as marshal. He was 54 years old, had been keeping the peace in Dodge City for nearly 20 years, and he was tired. More than that, he wanted to spend more time with his family, to watch his younger children grow, to be present for all the small moments he had missed while out enforcing the law. The town threw him a retirement party, honoring his years of service. Speeches were made about his bravery and dedication. Sarah sat beside him, proud and smiling, and their children watched from the crowd. But the moment Cole treasured most came afterward, when they returned home and Sarah took his hand. What will you do with yourself now? She asked, her eyes twinkling with humor. You have never been a man who sits idle. I thought I might try my hand at something different, Cole said. Maybe help you with the farm, maybe spend time teaching the boys to shoot and ride properly. Maybe just be here every day watching our family grow. Sarah squeezed his hand. That sounds perfect, she said. We have been blessed, Cole. We have had challenges and heartbreak, but we have also had more joy than most people ever know. We have built something beautiful together. Cole looked around at the house they had expanded over the years, at the children who filled it with noise and laughter, at the woman who had become his whole world. Yes, he agreed quietly. Yes, we have. The years continued to pass, gentler now that Cole was no longer facing down outlaws and breaking up saloon fights. He devoted himself to his family, to being the kind of father and husband he had always wanted to be. He taught Thomas to track and hunt. He helped Grace learn to ride. He played with young Patrick and the twins, building them toy horses and reading them stories. Sarah continued to be the heart of their family, keeping everyone organized and loved. She was a grandmother now. Thomas had married at 23 and had given them a beautiful granddaughter named Sarah in honor of her grandmother. Watching Sarah hold her namesake grandchild, Cole was struck by how far they had come, by the legacy they were building together. In 1900, on a warm spring evening, Cole and Sarah sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the Kansas sky in shades of orange and gold. They were both in their 50s now, their children mostly grown, their lives settling into the peaceful rhythms of late middle age. Do you ever regret it? Cole asked suddenly. The way we came together, the fact that Patrick had to die for us to be together. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, considering the question carefully. I regret that Patrick died, she said finally. I regret that he never got to see Thomas grow up, that he missed out on so much. I regret the violence and the fear and the pain. But do I regret what we built together, you and I? Do I regret the life we have shared, the children we have raised? Never. Not for a single moment. She turned to face him, taking both of his hands in hers. Patrick was my first love, and I will always cherish the time we had together. But you, Cole Thornton, you are my great love. You are the man who saved me, who stood beside me, who built a life with me. You are the man I choose every day, over and over again. And I thank God for the night that brought us together, terrible as it was, because it led to this, to us, to everything we have become." Cole felt tears prick his eyes, a rare occurrence for the tough former marshal. "I love you," he said simply. "I have loved you since the moment I walked into that cabin and saw you fighting for Thomas's life. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." Sarah leaned in and kissed him, soft and sweet, and they sat together on the porch as the sun sank below the horizon and stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Inside the house, they could hear their younger children finishing their evening chores, bickering good-naturedly about whose turn it was to do dishes. "Tell me again," Sarah said softly. "Tell me about that night, about the prayers you whispered, about what you were thinking when Mrs. Hadley said Thomas would not survive." Cole closed his eyes, letting himself remember. "I was thinking that I could not let you give up," he said quietly. "That you were the bravest woman I had ever seen and you deserved a chance to save your baby. I was thinking that I would do anything, give anything to see you and Thomas survive the night. So I prayed. I prayed harder than I had ever prayed in my life. I bargained with God, I begged him. I promised him anything if he would just let you both live." "And your prayers were answered," Sarah whispered. "More than answered," Cole corrected. "God gave me more than I asked for that night. He gave me you. He gave me Thomas and Grace and Patrick and hope and faith. He gave me a family, a purpose, a life worth living. He gave me everything, Sarah. Everything I never knew I wanted or needed." Sarah rested her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence as full dark descended. This was what happiness felt like, Cole thought. Not the dramatic intensity of that night when Thomas was born, not the passion of early love, but this steady, peaceful contentment. This knowledge that he was exactly where he was supposed to be, with exactly the people he was supposed to be with. Years later, when Cole was 75 years old and Sarah was 72, they sat on that same porch on a summer evening. They were grandparents many times over now, their house constantly filled with visiting children and grandchildren. Thomas had become a lawyer, practicing in Dodge City and carrying on his father's legacy of justice in a different way. Grace had married a doctor and moved to Kansas City, though she visited often. Patrick had taken over the family farm, expanding it into a successful operation. Hope and Faith had both married well and were raising families of their own. Cole's health was failing now, his heart was weak and he tired easily. But his mind was sharp, and his love for Sarah had never dimmed. She sat beside him, her hand in his as it had been for more than 20 years of marriage, and they watched their great-grandchildren play in the yard. "I need to tell you something," Cole said quietly. "Something I have never told anyone." Sarah looked at him with concern, seeing something serious in his expression. "What is it?" "That night when I was praying for you and Thomas, I made God a promise," Cole said. "I told him that if he let you both live, I would spend the rest of my life taking care of you. I would be whatever you needed me to be. I would give you everything I had. And I have kept that promise, Sarah. I have tried every single day to be worthy of the gift he gave me." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "You have more than kept that promise," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You have given me a life beyond anything I could have imagined. You have been a wonderful husband, an amazing father, a blessing to everyone who knows you." Cole reached up to touch her face, his hand trembling slightly with age. "I want you to know that I have no regrets," he said. "Every choice I made, every path I took, it all led me to you. And I would do it all again, exactly the same way, just to end up here on this porch with you beside me." Sarah leaned in and kissed him, gentle and sweet, tasting of tears and love. "I love you, Cole Thornton," she whispered against his lips. "I will love you forever." "And I love you, Sarah," Cole replied. "My Sarah, my love, my life." They sat together as the sun set, their hands clasped. Their lives intertwined so completely that it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. And when Cole closed his eyes for the last time, it was with Sarah's hand in his and her voice whispering prayers in his ear, just as he had once whispered prayers for her and their son on that long-ago night when everything had begun. Cole Thornton died peacefully in his sleep 3 days later, surrounded by his wife and children. His funeral was one of the largest Dodge City had ever seen, with people coming from across Kansas to pay their respects to the man who had kept the peace for so many years, who had been a pillar of the community, who had lived with honor and integrity. But the eulogy that mattered most came from Thomas, now a distinguished man in his 40s, who stood at his father's grave and told the story one final time. The story of the midwife who said the baby would not survive birth. The story of the cowboy who prayed beside the mother until dawn broke. The story of how a tragedy became a miracle, and how that miracle became a love story that lasted a lifetime. My father once told me that he prayed harder that night than he had ever prayed in his life, Thomas said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. He prayed for my survival and for my mother's, and his prayers were answered in ways he never expected. He got more than a child who lived. He got a family. He got love. He got a life that had meaning and purpose, and he gave us all the same. He gave us his strength, his honor, his unwavering devotion. He gave us everything. Sarah stood beside Thomas, tears streaming down her face, supported by her other children. She had known, of course, that this day would come eventually. She and Cole had discussed it in the quiet hours of the night, had made their peace with the inevitable. But knowing it was coming did not make it hurt any less. After the funeral, after the crowds had dispersed, and the children had returned to their homes, Sarah sat alone in the house she had shared with Cole for more than 20 years. She held Patrick's pocket watch in one hand, the watch that had been given to Thomas, who had given it back to her after Cole's death, saying it should stay in her keeping. In her other hand, she held Cole's badge, the symbol of all those years he had spent protecting others. 2 men. 2 great loves, 2 lives that had shaped her own. Patrick had given her Thomas and shown her what gentle, steady love looked like. Cole had saved her life twice over and shown her what it meant to be cherished, to be a partner, to build something lasting together. Both men had made her who she was. Both were irreplaceable. Sarah lived for another 7 years after Cole's death, long enough to see all her children well established, long enough to hold great-grandchildren, and know that the legacy she and Cole had built together would continue long after she was gone. She never remarried, never even considered it. Cole had been her last and greatest love, and she was content to spend her remaining years honoring his memory and enjoying her family. When Sarah died peacefully in her sleep in 1908, she was buried beside Cole in the Dodge City Cemetery. Their graves were marked with simple headstones that listed their names and dates, but below Cole's name, at Sarah's request, were the words, "He prayed beside her until dawn broke." Thomas, now in his 50s and a respected judge, stood at his mother's grave with his own children and grandchildren around him. He held Patrick's pocket watch in his hand. It would be his to keep now, to pass down to his own son someday, and he told the story one more time. The story that had become legend in their family. The story of the night he was born, the night that changed everything. "My mother used to say that God works in mysterious ways," Thomas said, his voice steady despite the tears on his cheeks. "She said that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead to the best things. That night when I was born should have been a tragedy. The midwife said I would not survive. My first father died protecting us. Everything was blood and pain and fear, but from that darkness came light. My godfather, who became my father, refused to give up. He prayed beside my mother through the night, and when dawn broke, I was alive. My mother was alive, and the foundation was laid for a family that would span generations." He looked around at all the faces watching him, his siblings, their children, their grandchildren. Multiple generations of Thorntons, all alive because of the prayers whispered on one desperate night, all here because one man had refused to accept that death was inevitable. "That is the legacy my parents left us," Thomas continued. "Not wealth or fame, but something better. They taught us that love is worth fighting for, that family is worth everything, that prayers can be answered in unexpected ways, that miracles do happen if you are brave enough to believe in them. That is what I will pass on to my children, and what I hope they will pass on to theirs. The story of the night I was born. The story of the cowboy who prayed beside my mother until dawn broke. The story of how tragedy became triumph, and how two people found love in the most unlikely of circumstances." The family gathered that evening at the house that Cole and Sarah had built together, the house that had been expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family. It was full now, bursting with people and noise and life. Children ran through the rooms where Cole and Sarah had raised their own children. Babies cried in the nursery where Grace and the twins had once slept. Laughter echoed from the kitchen where Sarah had cooked countless meals. And on the mantel, in a place of honor, sat three objects: Patrick's pocket watch, Cole's marshal's badge, and a faded photograph of Sarah holding baby Thomas, taken just weeks after that terrible night. These were the tangible reminders of where they had all come from, of the love and sacrifice that had built this family. Thomas stood in the crowded house, surrounded by the fruits of his parents' love, and felt a profound sense of peace. This was what they had created together, Cole and Sarah, and even Patrick in his own way. A legacy that would endure long after all of them were gone. A family bound together by love and faith, and the memory of one impossible night when prayers were answered and miracles happened. The sun set over Kansas, painting the sky in familiar shades of orange and gold, just as it had on that long-ago night when Cole Thornton had knocked on a cabin door and found his destiny waiting on the other side. The wind whispered through the prairie grass, carrying with it the echoes of old prayers and older promises. And in the house where Cole and Sarah had built their life together, their family gathered to remember, to celebrate, and to carry forward the love that had started with a desperate prayer and a stubborn refusal to give up hope. This was their story. The story of the midwife who said the baby would not survive birth. The story of the cowboy who prayed beside the mother until dawn broke. The story of how love grew from tragedy, how family was built on faith, and how a single night of desperate prayer changed the course of countless lives. And it was a story with a happy ending, as all the best love stories are. Not an easy ending. There had been loss and grief and struggle along the way, but a good ending nonetheless. An ending where love won, where family thrived, where the impossible became possible, and where two people who were meant to be together found their way to each other despite all the obstacles in their path. The night deepened, stars appearing one by one in the vast Kansas sky. In the house, the family continued their celebration, their voices rising in laughter and song. And somewhere in whatever place souls go after this life ends, Cole and Sarah were together again, their hands clasped, their love eternal. They were watching over the family they had built, proud of what had grown from that one desperate night of prayer and struggle. The story was ended now, complete and whole. But the legacy continued, carried forward in the hearts and lives of all those who came after. And that, Thomas thought as he looked around at his family, was the greatest miracle of all. Not just that he had survived when he should have died, but that from that survival had come this, generations of love, of life, of family. This was what Cole's prayers had really created. Not just a single life saved, but countless lives enriched, a legacy that would continue long into the future. And so the story of the midwife and the cowboy, of the mother and the baby, of the prayer and the dawn, became legend. It was told and retold, passed down through generations, a reminder that miracles do happen, that love endures, and that sometimes the darkest nights lead to the most beautiful dawns. The end was also a beginning, as all good endings are. the beginning of a legacy. The beginning of a family that would thrive for generations. The beginning of a love story that would never truly end because it lived on in the hearts and lives of all those who came after. And on quiet evenings, when the family gathered on that same porch where Cole and Sarah had spent so many hours together, they could almost feel their presence. They could almost hear Cole's steady voice and Sarah's gentle laughter. They could almost sense the love that had built this place, this family, this life. The cowboy and the mother, the prayer and the dawn, the tragedy and the triumph, all woven together into a story that would never be forgotten. A story of love that conquered death, of faith that moved mountains, of two souls who found each other in the darkest of times and built something beautiful together. This was their legacy. This was their gift. This was the story of how a marshal who thought he would always be alone found a family. How a woman who thought she had lost everything found love again. How a baby who was not supposed to survive grew into a man who honored both of his fathers. How tragedy became triumph, how darkness became light, how the desperate prayers of one long night became the foundation of generations of happiness. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the Kansas night embraced the land, the story continued. Not in words now, but in lives lived, in love shared, in the quiet, everyday miracles of family. The story of the midwife who said the baby would not survive birth, and the cowboy who prayed beside the mother until dawn broke. A story with a beginning, a middle, and now, finally, a proper ending. An ending that was also a forever beginning, because love like theirs never truly ends. It just transforms, generation after generation, into new stories, new love, new life. And that was how it should be. That was how all the best love stories end, not with an ending at all, but with a continuation, a legacy, a love that lives on forever in the hearts of those who come after. Cole and Sarah's story was finished, but their love was eternal. Their family was their monument, their descendants their legacy, and their love story would be told and retold for as long as memory lasted. The night settled fully over Kansas now, peaceful and complete. The family gradually dispersed to their homes, carrying with them the warmth of togetherness and the comfort of shared history. And in the old house where Cole and Sarah had loved and lived and built their life together, peace reigned. The peace of a story well told, a life well lived, a love well shared. The cowboy had prayed beside the mother until dawn broke, and from that prayer had come everything, life and love and family and joy. It had been enough. More than enough. It had been everything, and that truly was the end. The happy, complete, perfect end to a love story that had begun in blood and prayer and darkness, and had blossomed into light and joy and love that would last forever. This was the ending they deserved, the ending they had earned through struggle and faith and unwavering devotion to each other. This was their happily ever after, not without challenges or sadness, but filled with more love than most people ever know. And it was enough. It was everything.